Classical Conversations presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Refining Rhetoric, and we got to talk about this outrageous story in Christianity today, released on September 6th, encouraging Christian parents that you can build your kids' faith muscles by sending them to public school, and this is just a ridiculous argument, and Chris, take us to the article.
All right, so the name of the article is Public School Can Be a Training Ground for Faith. And I love the nuance and the tact with which the author addresses the situation. They talk about how a lot of Christians compare sending your kids to public school as sending them to a godless institution. And then they make the exception that, like, we're talking specifically about my children and our situation and our circumstance and our public school districts and our teachers, and it's okay for us. And I love how gently they approach the topic. And I want to say they're just categorically wrong. They're absolutely wrong. Tell me why, Robert.
Well, the first thing is they're talking about this training ground for faith. And as you all know, like, I was a college athlete. My wife was a college athlete. We train Olympians. We're 3-time national champions in rugby. And in no way is strength training something that you do on the field. It's something you do that's guided by individuals who have the same goals for you. It is done before playing, and it's something that is very carefully curated. It's not just left to some stranger. It's not just left to happenstance. It's not left to the other team that you're going to be playing against later to train your people. You do it very intentionally. And so it's just a ridiculous idea on its face. And then, the fact that they had this poor girl write this article, Stephanie, I think she admits that her kid is 2. And just the idea of this magazine that's read by so many people thinking, let's give parenting advice. And hey, your oldest kid is 2. Let's do that. I mean, my oldest kid is 9, and I give parenting advice very carefully with a lot of nuance around it, as far as saying, this is what my friend did, or this is what I read about, or this is what worked for me growing up that I remember. So it's just a crazy idea. And it's really led by, I believe, a worldview that's the antithesis of what the Bible tells us to do as parents. So, Chris, what are some of these quotes here that you want to dive into?
I mean, so we have to go back to the source of some of these ideas, right? She talks about how our children are to be the salt and light to the world. I mean, this is coming from Matthew 5:13, I think, is the reference she's talking about, being the salt and light to the world. And it's so wrong-headed. If you go through the Beatitudes, so much of what God is saying, what Jesus is saying in this passage, is kind of counter to what we would think intuitively. What matters more is their eternal soul than their worldly, like, physical, what's happening to their body. And if you're a Christian, you should believe that. And so, like, give me some reasons why she's just categorically wrong about this idea that you send babies off to fight your wars.
Well, yeah, I think, in the Bible, we really clearly see in the Old Testament, you had to be 30 before you kind of served the church. And Jesus didn't start his ministry till he was 30. And it talks about, the Bible explicitly talks about raising children up in the way that they should go, that, bad morals corrupts good morals. And of course, there's the entire book of Proverbs that makes it really clear on the type of environment that we need to send our kids to. You can look at, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When Babylon, captured Israel, they took their best and brightest and put it in their king's school because they wanted them to serve their king, right? And so there is nothing about modern day, the government school systems that serves the king, the one whose knee everyone shall bow down to. The idea of sending little kids to be salt and light in a system where they're trying to learn, where they're trying to build their worldview, build a strong foundation. It just doesn't work. It would be like sending your 6-year-old into a battle without a sharp blade. One, they're going to get killed, and regardless, but they don't even have the ability to defend themselves. They haven't been trained in apologetics. They haven't been nurtured through a biblical worldview. The results speak for themselves. I mean, I think Barna's done research on this, or maybe it was the SBC, where it was something like 80% of kids, 70% of kids, somewhere in that range, that go to church regularly, which I think was like 2 times a month, but are in government schools, are no longer attending church, no longer identify with the faith just 2 years after graduating from high school. So the science, the statistics speak for themselves, that you effectively have somewhere between a 70 and 80% chance of losing your kid if you send them to these places for education. And, yes, sometimes, those 20 or 30% get out, but would you put your kid in a car if there was a 30% chance that they would survive the car wreck that was going to happen? And she talked in here about how, public schools aren't as bad as they used to be, that, being a Christian doesn't have as much bullying. Like, is she not in tune with what's going on around us with the LGBTQ indoctrination, with kids as young as kindergarten being taught all sorts of different sexually deviant behaviors, teachers asking kids what their pronouns are, doing all sorts of things to really divide the classroom by gender or race. So it's just ridiculous.
So, Robert, how do you answer someone that comes to you and says, "Oh, I mean, I understand there's all these reasons and maybe there's some evidence, but we just feel really called to send our kid to public school." Like, how do you answer someone that's dug in like that?
Well, I think the first thing is you got to start asking them some questions to really get into why they're saying that. So one is like, okay, so how much training have you given your kids? What classes and certifications have they received? Or things like that. Like, oh, they must have a really strong faith. Like, what are some of the apologetics that they've been taught in? And of course, the answer is probably going to be almost nothing. The only time that I've ever heard of someone who said that I could look at them and be like, okay, maybe you were called in this position, was someone who their kids had been on the mission field for 10 years with them. They were going into the 11th grade and they were in the United States for the first time. And literally they had served under their parents, being homeschooled, being in a Christian education environment full time for a decade, that I was like, okay, maybe they could handle it, or maybe God could be calling to you that. But the default in American churches today is that 80-90% of families are sending their kids to the public school. And God could not be calling 80 or 90% of his children into that system. So the first thing we need to do is really get the kids out. And then, okay, maybe 1 or 2% God could be calling in, but God's not calling 80 or 90%. And for most of these families, he's definitely not calling you and your children to be in the public school. And so, there are instances where maybe, there's a divorce happening or something really bad happened, and there's, a legal requirement for you to send your kid to the public school for system for a while, or there's really no other current option for you. But in those situations, the job of the church, the job of leaders that know and love this family, should be getting them out of that system and into a better situation as quickly as possible. And it should be a temporary solution, not a final solution, and definitely not a preferred solution or a solution we're encouraging people to go do. We wouldn't say, hey, Chris, go to the mission field, go to Zambia and not teach you the language, not teach you the history, the culture of it, and put you on a plane tomorrow. But that's what we're doing with our 6-year-olds. This is what this author's encouraging others to do with children as they enter public school or enter the school age. And so that is just, the antithesis of what we're called to do in the Bible.
So what really gets me about this whole conversation, and it really frustrates me, is I understand, I think, a lot of the heart of where she's coming from is I feel called to put my kids into public school because, so often people are becoming apostate, they're leaving the church, whatever, give a reason, and we feel called this way. At the end of the day, am I wrong in saying this comes down to convenience? Am I wrong in saying that the only reason they want to send their children to public school is because they want to pull two incomes? I borrow a quote from your mother when she said, "When did it become the responsibility of the man to send his children to the lowest bidder and his wife to the highest?"
Yeah, it is a convenience thing, and I think the salt and light argument is just an excuse. Matthew 5:13 actually says, "Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall be salted? It's therefore good for nothing but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men." And I recently put that on my Facebook page, and my aunt, who's a Catholic and she's married to an atheist and they don't practice, was like so confused by it. I'm like, look, Christian parents are saying their kids are salt and light, but the Bible is very clear that, 1 Corinthians, I think 5:33 says that evil corrupts good, not the opposite way. And then in this verse in Matthew is saying, look, what if the salt's no good? The salt can go bad. And that's what we're seeing with these statistics where 70 to 80% of the kids are walking away, that their faith, that they're no longer salty and they're no better than being trodden underfoot by men.
And I think this is where the misunderstanding comes from. People want to say, well, kids they're gonna kind of rebel against what they see in their environment. So I want them to rebel against the world. So I want them to see what's happening in the world so they come back to Christ. No, wrong. The kids that are leaving the church aren't leaving because their parents are setting a great example. More often than not, it's because they see disparity. They see issues with their faith and the way they're not leading it out. They see hypocrisy, and that's what sours them against the gospel. If you live the words you're preaching, your children see it and they follow an instruction. And I think that's written all through the Bible. Like that's kind of, it's not a promise, but it is sort of a promise. That the children that leave the faith aren't leaving because they've had an awesome example that's rock solid. They leave because of hypocrisy.
Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Be not deceived. Evil associations corrupt good manners." It's also translated is "bad company corrupts good morals. Evil communications corrupt good manners. Bad company corrupts good character. Bad friends will destroy you." So those are some of the different translations of that Bible verse. And that's exactly what we see. 66% of Gen Zers say that lying is not wrong. That's one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not lie. And so you are literally sending your kids into an environment where 66% of their friends, maybe more, maybe a little less, will believe that lying is not a sin, that there's nothing wrong with it. And so this is the system you're sending your kids into. If we're to teach our kids the 10 commandments, if we're to write it on our hearts, to let them know about them daily, and we are outsourcing their education 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 30 some weeks a year, 36 weeks a year, it's not going to work out. And we see that time and time again. Well, we'd love to hear from you. What do you think? Can public school be a training ground for faith? I've also written about this in the Christian Post, and we'll, of course, include those notes or the link to that in the show notes. Please share this episode with a friend. And until next time, God bless. Hey everyone, the Copper Lodge Library series has a new book out, The Secret Garden. It is a beloved classic novel. It has footnotes that will really help you understand what's going on in the novel, understand Word definitions really brings the reading to another level for you and your students. Christian themes in the Secret Garden include redemption, love, the importance of community, and the foreword reminds us to approach life with wisdom. It is a wonderful read aloud for your younger students and a piece of the curriculum that you will encounter with your challenge students as well. So go to copperlodgelibrary.com or the classicalconversationsbooks.com to get your copy today. Again, that's copperlodgelibrary.com to see the complete collection. Now let's get back to the show.
Welcome to Classical Crypto today. It is such a pleasure to be with you. A lot happening here at the end of September. But today I want to go over the price and then share what's been in crypto news this week. So today, September 26th, kind of a special day on our TA charts. We drew a line back in July of historically when the price of Bitcoin would start to climb. And in our model, today is that day where we dropped our mark. And for the first time in 3 months, Bitcoin is above $65,000. So that was a prediction, 2-3 month prediction that is coming true. So that was really awesome to see. Bitcoin is currently hovering around that $65,000 mark and it's getting a lot of steam behind it again. We just had rate cuts a couple weeks ago, which should, in theory, start elevating that price and making the cost of money go down. People thus have a little bit more to invest into investments, different asset classes, commodities, etc. So that's pretty exciting to see what's happening. The market's definitely getting a little bit of boost as far as market cap and whatnot. But news of the week is that Gary Ginsler of the SEC is under fierce scrutiny. He had to testify in Congress this week, and he was just absolutely torn apart in Congress because he has mismanaged so badly the SEC and attacking so many different companies, including digital asset companies, not providing any clarity, not giving definition. It's just been a complete mess to the point that Republicans and Democrats in a bipartisan fashion are calling for his resignation or him to be fired or something. It's just so obvious that he's doing such a bad job. Even Kamala Harris's campaign seems to be leaning heavily against him continuing in leadership over at the SEC. That is very interesting, and I would not be surprised if he is fired or resigns in the next couple weeks because of all that's happening right now. Even Hester Pierce, who works alongside Gary, she was a attorney promoted by Trump to serve as a commissioner over there at the SEC. She's come forward stating this week that crypto assets should have been deemed non-security a long time ago, and she's somewhat apologetic to communities, companies, and people who are interested in this investment class because there has not been clarity. There's been a lot of vagueness and ambiguity. So we're starting to see the cracks in the SEC's stranglehold over this industry, and even a lot of Democrats who have traditionally been against digital assets or really pushing for regulation before it happens. Not that they can really control that, but they are starting to see other countries aggressively start to have policies surrounding digital assets, and other countries are adopting faster than the U.S. is. Well, the U.S. is usually a leader in new technology, so this is definitely different and definitely something that the Democrats are swinging around to and going, wow, we might have misjudged what's going on here. Let's get Gary out so that this industry has a chance to thrive and that we can bring some regulation in. That's really what we need, is some policy surrounding cryptocurrency. So anyways, I would look into Gary Ginsler and what's happening. If he is removed or gets out of the way, that's just paving the way for further crypto adoption. So I'll keep an eye on it and I'll keep you updated. Thanks for listening to Classical Crypto with Will.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.